I used to believe that tragedy would arrive with a loud thunderclap, with clear warning signs like the ones you see in movies, but it didn't. It slithered in quietly, right in the middle of a peaceful afternoon in the suburbs of Denver, under a clear sky and silent leaves. It took less than a minute. A ruptured blood vessel, one wrong breath, and my life shattered. And the moment I realized I'd lost my baby girl didn't come with tears. It came with an empty stare from the man who had once promised to protect both me and our child. From that second on, I didn't just lose a life. I lost the part of my humanity I had tried so hard to preserve for this marriage. My name is Eleanor Ward, 34 years old. We lived in a 3-story house in the northern suburbs of Denver. My husband, Jacob, 38, was the director of strategic development at a clean energy tech startup. Out in the world, he was the ideal man, successful, polished, principled. But at home, Jacob was someone else entirely. The baby girl in my womb had already been named Lily. I whispered her name to my belly every night, gently stroking it, imagining her brown hair, her smile, her laughter filling our home. But now, Lily was gone. I was lying on the cream-colored couch in our living room when the blood began to soak through the gauze and hospital pad, not even 15 minutes after I got home. That sofa was the one Jacob insisted on buying from a pricey Italian showroom downtown, because it would photograph well when guests came over. Its ivory color didn't last long. Within minutes, dark red stains spread like ink, swallowing the expensive leather surface. I grimaced from the sharp cramps in my abdomen, like my body was punishing me for not keeping the baby. But worse than the pain was the look in Jacob's eyes, cold as steel, completely devoid of sympathy. He didn't ask if I was in pain, didn't offer medication, didn't call the doctor. He just stood there, as if staring at a pile of trash he didn't know how to clean up. "You never really wanted this baby," Jacob said, each word slicing through the air like a blade. I looked up, confused. "What are you talking about?" "You were jealous of Natalie," he continued, referring to my sister-in-law, who had just shown off her 7-month belly at a party the weekend before. "You looked at her like you wanted to devour her, and now look, our baby's gone." I couldn't believe it. Me, the one who had painted little flowers on the nursery wall for 3 weeks. Me, who had chosen tiny socks and embroidered blankets. Me, the one who didn't want the baby? I tried to stand, but the pain knocked me back down. Right then, my mother-in-law, Lorraine, walked in, without knocking, without warning. She still had a key, even though I had made it clear from the beginning that I wanted privacy after marriage. But, to Jacob's family, boundaries was a foreign concept. "This girl has never been able to handle other people's happiness," she said, like she was reciting lines from a bad play. I saw it in her eyes when Natalie announced her pregnancy. Jealousy, pure and simple. I shook my head weakly. "I'm bleeding." "You need to take responsibility for what you did," Lorraine cut in, her hands gripping my shoulders, shoving me back onto the couch like I was a criminal. Her manicured nails pierced through my thin hospital gown, scratching the bruises left by IV needles. "Jacob?" I whimpered, but his gaze didn't change. When the kick came, I didn't even react in time. His leather shoe, the ones he only wore to high-stakes meetings, slammed into my rib cage like a hammer. My breath vanished. My chest lit up with pain. And then came the stack of papers hitting the table. Divorce documents. He had prepared them in advance. Just when I thought I needed him the most. The man I called my husband used my dream of motherhood as a weapon. The blood didn't stop. The house, the couch, the glossy wooden floors, they were all stained red. But no one called for help. No one lifted me. I reached for my phone in my bag, but Jacob snatched it before I could dial. "You can call them from somewhere else." I understood. In their eyes, I was no longer human. I lost Lily. I lost blood. I lost breath. But something I thought had died for good came back to life, in the silence of an old bedroom painted lavender. I woke in the middle of the night, cold sweat soaking my collar. No more blood. No more screaming. No more Jacob. Just the sound of a wind chime tapping against the window of my childhood room in Salem, Oregon. My mother had cleared out her sewing table and fabric racks, leaving just enough space for me to start over. "You can stay here as long as you need," she said, gently placing her hand on my shoulder, as if any more pressure might shatter me. I didn't cry. I had exhausted my tears in the hospital hallway, in the taxi seat, on my parents' porch at 5 a.m. in a blood-soaked hospital gown. Now, I could only exist. For 2 weeks, I didn't leave the bed. Light stabbed at my eyes like needles. Food made me nauseous. My mom left water and pills by the door, never forcing me to eat. She understood. Someone who's been suffocated has to relearn how to breathe. On the 16th day, I opened the curtain. "Want to go to the farmer's market with me?" she asked that morning. He nodded. It was crowded in a comforting way. No one knew who I was. No one called me the crazy wife. No one looked at me with pity. People only asked, "Would you like to try a strawberry?" Or, "Fuji apples are really sweet today." I was reaching for a bag of apples when a warm, steady voice said, "Let me help with that." I turned. A man with slightly messy brown hair, hands speckled with blue paint, smiled and handed me the bag. "Lucas," he said, offering his hand. "I restore old furniture. Things people throw out, I bring back." I didn't know why those words caught in my throat. Maybe because I too had been discarded and was trying to function again. "I'm Eleanor," I replied. My voice didn't sound like my own. We met again the next Saturday, then the one after that, always in the same place. Fruit stands, soft country music, sunlight peeking through cottonwood branches. Lucas didn't pry, didn't judge, didn't pity. "Apples are a little tart today," he noted, "but sometimes the sour helps you stay awake better than sweet." I laughed. For the first time in 6 months, the sound escaped without dragging tears with it. I invited him for coffee after week 4. We sat for 3 hours at a small cafe by the lake. He told me about traveling through Southeast Asia, teaching underprivileged kids English, learning to carve wood from an old Cambodian craftsman. I told him about my work in graphic design, the one thing that made me feel in control when everything else fell apart. He didn't blink when I told him I'd been kicked in the ribs while bleeding from a failed pregnancy. He just said quietly, "People who know how to inflict pain never really know how to endure it." We didn't speak much after that, but when he placed a hand gently on my back, where my spine had bent from too much fear, I didn't flinch. I felt warm. I started therapy, twice a week. My therapist, Dr. Amelia Stein, didn't offer clichés. She asked, "How does it feel to be in your body today?" That one question made me cry, though I couldn't explain why. She taught me words like emotional regulation, psychological abuse, cognitive restructuring. Terms I once thought only lived in textbooks, now matched the nights I shook under blankets at the sound of a turning doorknob. Lucas didn't disappear when I told him the worst parts. He listened. Didn't try to fix me, didn't dissect my pain, didn't ask, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" He just said, "You're still here, still breathing, still alive. That's already brave." 3 months later, I invited him to dinner at my mom's. She roasted chicken, I made strawberry salad with apple cider vinegar. We sat on the porch where I used to play with dolls at 8. Lucas gave me a small succulent in a ceramic pot. "They're stubborn little things," he smiled. "Hard to kill, just like you." I looked at that tiny plant resting in my palm and realized, maybe, so was I. I thought I had sealed the past in a locked box, buried under silence, but some things find their way back. Especially when they were never truly laid to rest. One Tuesday afternoon, I was picking out beets at the farmer's market when a chill ran down my spine. It wasn't because someone touched me, just a passing glance, and I saw Ethan, standing about 30 steps away. There was no mistaking him. Neatly trimmed brown hair, a gray button-up shirt fitted across his broad shoulders, and on his left wrist, the same Tag Heuer watch I'd given him for our 5th wedding anniversary. He was standing beside a young blonde woman, her hair in soft waves, wearing a cream sweater and spotless white jeans. I turned away, heart pounding. Lily, the old apartment, blood, kicks, divorce papers. It all came rushing back in a flood of memory that soaked my palms in cold sweat. "You okay?" Lucas's voice came from behind me, his hand brushing my elbow gently. I nodded, short of breath, trying to stay composed. But then I saw Ethan turn his head. Those light brown eyes met mine. In less than a second, his face shifted 3 times. Shock, confusion, and then fear. And when his gaze dropped to little Noah, sitting in the stroller, clutching a piece of bread and humming a children's song, I saw something else flicker in Ethan's eyes. Suspicion. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "Is that my child?" I froze, staring at the screen. The audacity of the message tightened my throat. No apology, no concern, just an accusation disguised as a question. I blocked the number immediately, but a small crack had formed in the peace I'd spent so long rebuilding. 2 days later, I got a call from Miss Nellie, the elderly woman who lived on the ground floor of the old apartment building Ethan and I shared in Salt Lake City. "Sweetheart, I don't mean to meddle, but I think you should know. Ethan came by the other night. He was asking the security guard about the night you left." My heart stopped. He wanted to see the security footage, wanted to know if anyone saw his wife losing control. Luckily, Marcus didn't have access to the tapes, but I kept something. I sank into my chair as she spoke. That night, I turned on my Ring camera because I heard loud noises. I saw you. I saw the blood. I saw Lorraine pushing you toward the elevator, and Marcus just standing there. I gripped my phone, overwhelmed by a mix of rage and gratitude. "You still have the video?" I asked, voice shaking. "I do, and the police report I filed. They didn't do anything, but I kept the original." I went quiet. For months I had wondered, did anyone see me? Did anyone witness the truth outside of me? Now I knew. Someone had. A week later, I got a message from someone I never expected. Clara, Ethan's younger sister. "I know I've been silent too long, but I need to talk to you. I can't let people keep thinking you're the woman who lost the baby on purpose. Do you have 30 minutes? We met at a small downtown cafe. Clara looked more worn than I remembered. Fine lines etched around her eyes, and her thin fingers trembled as she stirred her mint tea. "I always knew you weren't the villain. I saw how you talked about Lily, how you tended that little nursery. I was just afraid of Ethan, of the way he'd crush a wine glass when someone disagreed with him." I didn't say anything, I just listened. Clara took a deep breath and opened her phone. "He started telling people you got rid of the baby on purpose, that you couldn't stand Natalie being pregnant first. But you know what's scariest?" I shook my head. I started to believe it, because I was too afraid to face the truth. My brother is a monster. I cried. Not out of pain, but because, finally, someone had the courage to say it aloud. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep, I pulled the USB Nellie sent from the drawer. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was there, like a shield protecting the memory I'd once thought was madness, was enough. Lucas sat beside me, saying nothing, just placing a hand on my shoulder. "You already know, don't you?" I whispered. He nodded. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "Just be here." Lucas stayed quiet for a while, then asked softly, "What if one day he comes back? Not with a message, but with a lawyer?" I looked toward Noah's room. "I'm not afraid anymore, because this time I have proof. I have people who believe me, and I have myself. Are you sure you want to know everything?" The question came from Natalie, the woman who once made me feel invisible at every family dinner. Now she was sitting across from me at a quiet Mexican diner, one hand unconsciously resting on her third trimester belly like a reflex. I nodded without hesitation. Because I don't plan to spend the rest of my life wondering. Natalie placed her phone on the table. The screen lit up with messages I never wanted to see. Screenshots, voice notes, all from Ethan. Vile, cruel, unforgivable. Losing the baby was the price she had to pay. At least now I know what kind of woman I married. Even my sister can't stand seeing her fake holiness. I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone was holding my head underwater, not to kill me, but to teach me how far people can sink when they've lost control. He sent those after you lost Lily, Natalie said, her eyes fixed on me. I saw them, and I stayed quiet. Because I was weak, because I didn't want to break the family. But now I know. Silence is worse than betrayal. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. Thank you for not staying quiet any longer. 2 weeks later, another message came. This time from Amanda, Ethan's fiancée. I think we need to talk. I need to understand. We met at a cafe near the city park, somewhere no old memory could reach me. Amanda wore a charcoal gray coat, her hair pinned back. Her face no longer carried the innocence I remembered from her engagement photos. She had begun to question, and once doubt takes root, in the right place, it never dies quietly. I read what he sent you, she said bluntly. I even found your hospital discharge papers from that night, buried in an old file box he kept hidden in the basement, and I don't understand how he can still deny any of it. Because he needs someone to blame, I replied. And I was the easiest target. Wounded, alone, with no one to speak up. Amanda looked down at her tea, lips trembling slightly. I'm about to marry a man whose own mother once held down his wife while he kicked her in the ribs. I know I should be scared, but I'm just disgusted and ashamed. I didn't comfort her, not out of cruelty, but because she needed to see the entire truth, without sugarcoating it. I have a video, I said slowly, of me leaving the apartment that night, covered in blood, barefoot, with no one helping. Amanda looked up, her eyes filled with horror. I want to see it. I handed her the USB drive Mrs. Nellie had given me. It's a copy. Keep it. Watch it when you're ready. 3 days later, I got a call from Clara, Ethan's younger sister. You won't believe this, she said, her voice trembling, a mix of shock and relief. Amanda just read Ethan's messages out loud at the wedding. In front of everyone. I didn't answer, I just went still. She read every line, didn't change a word. His mother, Lorene, went pale. Ethan looked like all the blood had drained from his body. Then Amanda took off her ring, set it on the wedding altar, and walked away without looking back. Hearing it felt like I'd been freed all over again. Not by a courtroom verdict, but by a truth that couldn't be silenced. Clara continued, nearly in tears. You know what? Someone filmed the whole thing. It's all over the internet. People are asking, how has a man like that been walking free for the past 2 years? I knew the answer. Because women like me are rarely believed, until the evidence shows up, as blood, as words, as public shame. That night, I sat with Lucas on the back steps, watching Noah play with a toy flashlight, its beam dancing among the purple daisies. He didn't ask anything. He just handed me a mug of hot cocoa, and when I curled up against his shoulder, he whispered, "Justice doesn't seem as loud as people think." I nodded. Because real justice doesn't arrive through shouting. It comes when truth can no longer be ignored. If you don't speak up, he'll have the chance to turn another woman's life into hell. Amanda's words echoed in my head the entire night. Not as advice, but as a sentence hanging over me. And I knew. I couldn't hide any longer. 3 days after the canceled wedding, Amanda sent me a video. No edits, no cuts, just raw footage of a wrecked ceremony. In it, she read Ethan's messages to me like she was delivering a public indictment. Losing the baby was the price she had to pay. She should have known she was never meant to be a mother. Guests were stunned. Some covered their mouths, others quietly walked out, but no one protested. Because truth, when delivered among wedding music and fresh flowers, is stronger than any excuse. Amanda took off her engagement ring, a sapphire the size of a fingernail, and laid it on the altar like she was returning a lie, then turned and walked away. I watched the video twice. Once with tears, the second time with resolve. I called an attorney, a woman named Deborah Klein, who specialized in domestic abuse and custody protection. She listened to the entire story in silence, never interrupting. When I finished, she exhaled. "We're not suing for money, we're suing for the truth." The investigation was reopened. This time, no one could look away. Footage from Mrs. Nellie's camera, the 911 report, Ethan's text messages, and now the wedding video. Everything was compiled into a thick case file. Police called me in for a statement. "Are you sure you want to dig this back up?" the investigator asked, eyeing me like he still had doubts. I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not digging anything up. I was never properly buried." Lucas came with me that day. He said nothing during the interview, just held my hand firmly beneath the table. His hand didn't tremble, and I stopped trembling the moment I saw Ethan's face on the 6 o'clock news. Defendant Ethan Carter, 38, officially under investigation for abuse and obstruction of justice. Clara sent me a message. "My mom's been hiding in the house. She's too ashamed to go outside after what happened at the wedding. I don't blame you anymore. I only blame myself for staying silent too long." I didn't respond. I didn't need apologies. I needed action. The hearing was closed to the public, but the media still captured a few images. Ethan stepped out of the police car in a wrinkled suit, his face ashen. For the first time, he couldn't control the crowd's gaze. For the first time, he couldn't twist the story to fit his narrative. Deborah said, "We don't need him to admit guilt. We need everyone else to see who's been lying all along." Amanda testified. She read the messages again, this time in court. Her voice didn't crack. She didn't cry. She simply said, "A man who can write words like that while his wife is bleeding doesn't deserve to be a father to anyone." When it was my turn, I said just 3 sentences. I left that apartment with blood soaked to my feet. No one helped me. And while I dragged myself across the cold lobby tiles, he stood there, saying I was doing it for attention. Ethan's lawyer called for recess. He didn't lift his head to look at me once more that entire session. That night, back home, I opened the cabinet, took out the USB, and placed it in my keepsake drawer. Not because I needed it for more hearings, but because I had let the truth speak for itself. Noah was asleep, hugging the stuffed deer Lucas bought during a trip to Vermont. I kissed his forehead. Not out of habit, but because I'd promised. The past would never touch my son again. Lucas was waiting for me in the kitchen. He'd made 2 cups of chamomile tea. He didn't say anything when I placed my hand over his, just looked at me for a long time, then said, "I used to think justice was a courtroom, but no. Justice is when you can sleep through the night without waking in a panic." I laughed. This time it was real, not forced, not polite, not to keep others from worrying. I laughed because I survived. And I won. "You'll never completely forget," Dr. Stein once said. "But you get to choose, live with the scar, or let it bleed forever." I chose. I chose to rise from the role of victim. I chose not to let Ethan's name be the first word in every chapter of my life. And most of all, I chose to love life again, starting from the smallest things. The following spring, Lucas proposed while I was arranging flowers in the kitchen, hands still covered in soil from my little potted succulents. He knelt beside the fridge as Noah babbled and banged a plastic spoon on the table. "I don't have a script or a fancy ring," he said, eyes locked on mine. but I have love, patience, and one hope. That I'll be the first person you think of when you're happy, and the last person you lean on when you're tired." I didn't wait for the full question. I nodded. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but this time, they were made of hope. We held the wedding in my mother's garden, the same place where I once played hide and seek at age 8, cried when my first bike got a flat tire, and spent the night after fleeing from Ethan, bloodied and disillusioned. My mother hung paper lanterns around the old maple tree. Clara volunteered to be my bridesmaid, bringing along her toddler son, who had just started to walk. Amanda sent flowers and a handwritten letter. "I used to think you were weak. Now I know you are living proof of quiet strength. I hope you'll always be the last one to walk out of the fire and survive." Noah was the ring bearer, holding the ring like it was a treasure. He took it so seriously that none of the guests could hold back their laughter. I walked down the aisle with no loud music, no sweeping veil, just a white dress that fit clean, simple, and a heart no longer bleeding. Lucas held my hand and whispered, "You don't have to become anyone else. The real you, wounded, honest, and brave, is the one I choose." We exchanged vows under the golden light of dusk. There were no declarations about forgetting the past, only a promise to move forward together, without denying what once was. 3 months after the wedding, I returned to design work, but this time independently. I opened a small studio specializing in book covers for female authors writing about healing from trauma. The stories I once feared became the inspiration behind every sketch. Clara visited on a Saturday afternoon. She stood in the studio, eyes scanning the manuscript-covered walls, then said, "You know what? I don't dream about him anymore." I smiled. "And I have stopped saying his name in mine." I once ran into Lorraine, Ethan's mother, at a pharmacy near our old neighborhood. She looked at me, seemed about to approach, but I just nodded slightly and turned away. Not in anger. Not in contempt. Just the clear divide between two worlds. One chose to live in lies, one stepped out and lived truthfully. On an autumn night, Noah, now nearly 4, tramped into my room clutching his pillow. "Mom, tell me the story of the day I was born." I sat on the bed, wrapping him in my arms. "When you came, I was trembling, but not afraid, because your dad held my hand the whole time, and when you cried for the first time, I knew I could love again." He grinned wide, not fully understanding, but his sparkling eyes looked at me like I was a hero. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Not because a court ruled in my favor, not because the internet rallied for justice, but because I had found myself, through pain, through voices brave enough to speak up, through the soft sunlight that follows a long rain. Not everyone gets a second chance to live. I did. From a woman crushed in both body and spirit, Eleanor rose, from blood, loss, and silenced screams. She didn't seek revenge through violence, but through truth, resilience, and a new life without the shadow of those who hurt her. Eleanor's story proves justice doesn't always come from the court. It sometimes comes simply from continuing to live, and not letting the past define you. That is the deepest kind of victory. What did you feel most deeply about Eleanor's journey? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories of family and survival.